I stood on the front porch of my daughter Rachel's house, clutching a bottle of vintage wine in one hand and a card in the other. I thought we were celebrating her 10th wedding anniversary. The house was a sprawling mansion in the suburbs, the kind with pillars that looked like marble but were actually hollow plaster. I reached for the doorbell, a smile on my face, ready to play the role of the supportive father. Then my phone buzzed in my breast pocket. It was a sharp, insistent vibration that made me pause. I pulled it out. The screen lit up with a text from Steinberg, my lawyer for 30 years. The message was short. "Do not sign anything. Call me immediately." My heart hammered against my ribs. Steinberg never texted after 5 in the afternoon unless the building was on fire. I stepped back from the door, moving into the shadow of a decorative cypress tree, and dialed his number. He answered on the first ring. Bernie listened to me very carefully. Steinberg's voice was low and urgent. "Rachel just sent a courier to my office. She filed a petition to activate a durable power of attorney over your estate. She claims you have been diagnosed with severe cognitive decline. She has a buyer lined up for your farm, Bernie. They want to close the sale tomorrow morning at 9. The phone almost slipped from my hand. My farm. The 200 acres of prime land I had bought 40 years ago, the place where I taught Rachel to ride a bike, the place where my late wife Catherine and I had planned to grow old. They were selling it. Tomorrow. Steinberg continued, his voice cutting through my shock like a razor. "They are claiming you are unfit, Bernie. They say you are a danger to yourself. If you sign any document tonight, any document at all, they can use it to validate their claim that you are compliant with their supervision. Do not sign." Do you understand? I understood. I understood everything in a single blinding flash. The invitations to dinner. The sudden concern for my health over the past few weeks. The way Jason, my son-in-law, had been asking about property taxes. It wasn't love. It was a demolition job. I hung up the phone and stood there in the dark. The cold night air bit into my face, but I didn't feel it. I felt a coldness spreading from my chest outward. They thought I was just an old retired construction worker living on a pension. They thought I was a senile old fool who could be moved around like a piece of furniture. They had no idea that I still owned 40% of the largest construction firm in the state through blind trusts. They had no idea they were declaring war on the man who built the very foundations of this city. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small digital voice recorder I used for dictating memoirs. I clicked it on and slipped it into the front pocket of my jacket, leaving the microphone just peeking out. I smoothed my tie. I put the smile back on my face, but it didn't reach my eyes. I pressed the doorbell. It was showtime. The door swung open, and there was Rachel. She was wearing a dress that probably cost more than my first car. Her smile was bright, too bright, like a neon sign that flickers before it burns out. "Dad, you made it." She pulled me into a hug that felt like a trap. She smelled of expensive perfume and desperation. Come in. Jason is just opening the wine. We have been waiting for you." I stepped into the foyer. The house was magnificent on the surface, but I knew construction. I looked at the crown molding and saw the hairline cracks. I looked at the floor and saw the cheap laminate disguised as hardwood. It was a house built on debt, a castle of cards waiting for a breeze. Jason walked out of the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. He was 42, but dressed like a 20-year-old influencer wearing sneakers that cost $500. "Hey, Bernie, good to see you." "Good to. You look a little tired. Are you feeling okay?" The game had begun. This was the gaslighting Steinberg had warned me about. They needed to establish that I was frail. I looked at him and blinked slowly, playing the part. "I am all right, Jason. Just a little trouble with my eyes lately." The drive over was a bit confusing. I intentionally slurred the word confusing just a fraction. Jason exchanged a quick, satisfied glance with Rachel. I saw it. They thought the bait was taken. Come sit down, Dad. Rachel guided me to the dining room table, her hand gripping my elbow a little too firmly, as if she were guiding a toddler. Brittany is here too. She is just finishing up a call. Brittany, my 19-year-old granddaughter, was slumped on the sofa in the living room. She didn't stand up. She didn't look up from her phone. Hey, Grandpa, she mumbled, her thumbs flying across the screen. I looked at her, the girl I had set up a college fund for, the girl whose first car I had secretly paid for. She looked at me with total indifference. To her, I was just an ATM that had stopped dispensing cash fast enough. We sat at the table. The dinner was elaborate. Roast beef, truffled potatoes, expensive wine. But the conversation was an interrogation disguised as small talk. Rachel poured me a glass of wine, filling it to the brim. So, Dad, Rachel said, cutting her meat with surgical precision. We were worried about you last week. You didn't answer your phone on Tuesday. Did you forget to charge it again? I hadn't forgotten. I was at a board meeting for the corporation finalizing a merger worth $30 million. But I couldn't tell them that. Not yet. I rubbed my forehead, feigning a headache. I think I lost the charger, Rachel. I looked for it in the kitchen, but I couldn't remember where I put it. My memory isn't what it used to be. Jason leaned forward, his voice dripping with fake sympathy. That is scary, Bernie. Losing things is the first sign. We have been reading about this. Living alone out on that big farm, it is dangerous. What if you fall? What if you leave the stove on? I took a sip of wine. It tasted bitter, or maybe that was just the bile rising in my throat. I am fine, Jason. The farm is my home. Catherine and I built that house. Rachel put her fork down. The metal clinked loudly against the china. Mom is gone, Dad. She has been gone for 5 years. You are holding on to a ghost. We just want you to be safe. We found this wonderful community. It is assisted living. They cook for you. They clean. You wouldn't have to worry about property taxes or maintenance. Assisted living. That was the code word for a nursing home where they could dump me and forget I existed. I looked around the room. I saw the new crystal chandelier. I saw the designer handbags on the counter. I saw the stack of unopened bills on the side table that Jason thought he had hidden. They didn't care about my safety. They cared about the $2 million my farmland was worth to developers. They were drowning in debt, and I was their life raft. I need to think about it, I said, making my hand tremble as I lifted the glass again. It is a big decision. We can help you with the decision, Jason said. He reached under the table and pulled out a leather folder. He placed it on the table and slid it toward me. In fact, we wanted to take a load off your shoulders tonight. This is just a standard form. It allows Rachel to handle the utility bills and the insurance for the farm. You know how complicated that paperwork gets. If you sign this, you won't have to worry about the mail anymore. We will handle the boring stuff. I looked at the document. It wasn't for utility bills. It was the durable power of attorney Steinberg had warned me about. It granted Rachel full, unrestricted control over my assets, my bank accounts, and my medical decisions. It was a death warrant for my independence. Brittany finally walked over to the table, grabbing a roll from the basket. Just sign it, Grandpa. Mom has been stressing about your bills for weeks. Just let them do it so we can eat dessert. Her tone was bored and titled. She viewed my life as an inconvenience that was delaying her sugar rush. I looked at the pen Jason was holding out to me. It was a nice pen. Mont Blanc. Probably bought with the money I gave them for Christmas. I reached for it, letting my hand shake violently. I watched their eyes. They were hungry. They were like wolves watching a wounded deer. Rachel was holding her breath. Jason was licking his lips. I took the pen. I brought the tip down to the paper. I saw Rachel's shoulders relax. She thought she had won. She thought the old builder was finally pouring the concrete on his own tomb. Then I jerked my hand. The wineglass tipped over. The deep red liquid splashed across the white tablecloth, soaking the document, turning the legal paper into a soggy red mess. "Oh no," I cried out, dropping the pen. "I am so clumsy. Look what I did. I am so sorry." I tried to dab at the paper with my napkin, effectively tearing the wet page right down the middle where the signature line was. Jason stood up so fast his chair fell backward. "Jesus, Bernie, watch what you are doing." The mask slipped. For a second, the caring son-in-law vanished, and the desperate, angry debtor appeared. Rachel shot him a warning look. Jason took a deep breath, clenching his fists. "It is okay, Dad. It is just wine. We can print another copy." "No, no," I said, standing up shakily. "I am ruining everything. I am making a mess. I feel dizzy. I think I need to go home. I forgot to take my heart medication. I need to go home right now." Rachel stood up, blocking my path. "Dad, you can't drive if you are dizzy. Stay here. We will print the paper and you can sign it, then you can sleep in the guest room." I looked her in the eye. This was the woman I had carried on my shoulders at parades. This was the woman I had comforted when her first boyfriend broke her heart. Now she was a stranger. "I cannot stay, Rachel," I said, allowing a rare tone of steel to enter my voice before masking it with frailty again. "If I don't take my pill in the next hour, Dr. Vance said I could have an episode. You don't want me to have a heart attack right here on your rug, do you?" The mention of a heart attack made her pause. If I died before signing it would go to probate, and that would take months. They didn't have months. Steinberg had told me they were 30 days away from foreclosure. They needed the farm sold this week. "Fine." Rachel snapped, her patience fraying. "Go home. Take your medicine. I will bring the papers to the farm tomorrow morning. We will do breakfast. Just you and me." I shuffled toward the door. Jason was staring at the ruined document, his face pale. He knew they were running out of time. I opened the front door, and the night air hit me again. I turned back to look at them one last time. "Happy anniversary," I said. I walked to my truck, my steps heavy but steady. I climbed in and locked the doors. I pulled the recorder out of my pocket and pressed stop. I had it. I had the pressure, the lies about the document's content, the admission that they were targeting the farm. I started the engine. I wasn't going home to sleep. I was going to Steinberg's office. He was waiting for me. We had a lot of work to do before the sun came up. My daughter wanted to play games with my legacy. She wanted to treat me like a child. Tomorrow I was going to show her what a grown man does when his family declares war. I drove away from the house of lies, and for the first time all night I smiled. But it wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a man who was about to foreclose on his own family. The heavy oak door of Steinberg's private office clicked shut behind me, sealing out the hum of the city. It was 1 in the morning, but the lights were blazing. This room smelled of old leather, expensive scotch, and billable hours. It was a smell I usually associated with victory, with closing multi-million-dollar deals for the Kowalski Group. Tonight, it smelled like a funeral home. Steinberg was sitting behind his massive mahogany desk, his tie undone, looking at a thick file spread out in front of him. He didn't look at me like a friend tonight. He looked at me like a general briefing a commander who had just been shot in the back. I walked over to the sidebar and poured myself a glass of water. My hands were steady now. The tremors I had faked at Rachel's dinner table were gone. I took a long drink, washing away the taste of that expensive wine and the lies my daughter had fed me. Steinberg watched me. He knew who I really was. To the world, to my neighbors, and even to my own ungrateful family, I was Bernie, the retired foreman, who lived on a pension and drove a 10-year-old truck. They saw the calluses on my hands and assumed I was simple. They didn't know that those calluses came from building the skyline of this city. They didn't know that the BK emblazoned on the cranes towering over downtown stood for Bernie Kowalski. I had kept my name off the Forbes list and my face out of the papers to protect them, to keep them grounded. What a spectacular failure that had been. Steinberg cleared his throat. He tapped a finger on the file. Bernie, we have a problem. A big one. Mike just sent over the financials on Jason and Rachel. It is worse than we thought. I sat down in the leather chair opposite him. Give it to me straight, Arthur. Don't sugarcoat it. I have built skyscrapers in hurricanes. I can handle a little rain. Steinberg slid a stack of papers across the desk. It wasn't rain, Bernie. It is a tsunami. Wow. Your son-in-law, Jason, the genius entrepreneur, isn't just having a bad month. He is drowning. He leveraged their house to buy into a cryptocurrency scheme 6 months ago. He lost everything. The bank sent a notice of default last week. They are 30 days away from foreclosure. I picked up the document. It was a foreclosure notice from First National. I saw the numbers. $500,000 in debt, $500,000. My jaw tightened. This was why they were so desperate. This was why they needed my farm. They weren't trying to help me manage my bills. They were trying to liquidate my life to cover their gambling losses. But that is not all, Steinberg said, his voice dropping an octave. Mike found something else. He got access to their private messages. You need to see this, Bernie. But I warn you, it is going to hurt more than the money. He handed me a tablet. On the screen was a chat log between Rachel and her best friend, a woman I had known since she was in diapers. I started reading. The timestamp was from 2 days ago. Rachel wrote, I don't know how much longer we can stall the bank. We need the money from the farm now. Her friend replied, can't you just ask him for a loan? He has savings, right? Rachel's response made the blood freeze in my veins. Asking him takes too long. He is so stubborn. He clutches those pennies like they are gold bars. Besides, he is useless now. He is just a bag of bones taking up space. I am just waiting for him to kick the bucket so we can finally live the way we deserve. The old man is practically dead anyway. We are just speeding up the paperwork. I stared at the words. Bag of bones. Waiting for him to kick the bucket. This was my little girl. The girl I had carried to bed when she fell asleep in the car. The girl whose hand I had held when her mother died. She wasn't just greedy. She despised me. She saw me as an obstacle, a piece of debris to be cleared from her construction site. The door to the office opened and Mike walked in. He was a former homicide detective, a man who had seen the worst of humanity, and even he looked uncomfortable. He didn't say hello. He just walked over and placed a flash drive on the desk. Mr. Kowalski, Mike said, his voice gravelly. I verified the doctor they are using. Dr. Vance. He has a record. He lost his license in Ohio for overprescribing opioids. He got it back here on a technicality. He is in debt to the same loan sharks Jason borrowed money from to cover his tracks. They aren't just looking for a diagnosis, Bernie. They bought one. I closed my eyes for a second. The betrayal was total. It was a conspiracy. My daughter, my son-in-law, a crooked doctor. They had built a cage for me bar by bar while smiling in my face. I stood up and walked to the window. I looked out at the city lights. I owned 3 of the buildings I could see from here. I had 4,000 employees who depended on my decisions. I was the silent king of this concrete jungle, and my own flesh and blood thought I was a senile old fool. I turned back to Steinberg and Mike. My face was stone. The pain was there deep in my gut, burning like a coal, but I pushed it down. I replaced it with the cold, hard logic of business. When a building has a rotten foundation, you don't patch it. You demolish it. Steinberg looked at me, his pen poised. What do you want to do, Bernie? We can file a restraining order. We can show them these texts. We can stop the power of attorney hearing before it even starts. No, I said. My voice filled the room, authoritative and final. That is what a victim does. I am not a victim. If we stop them now, they will just find another way. They will wait until I actually get sick. They will come back like termites. No, we are going to let them proceed. Steinberg frowned. Bernie, that is dangerous. If they get that signature. They won't, I interrupted. Listen to me. Here is the plan. First, I want you to move all my liquid assets, everything that isn't tied down in the corporate trusts. Move it to the account in Zurich. Tonight. Leave the local checking account with just enough to keep the lights on at the farm. Let them think that is all I have. Steinberg nodded, typing furiously. Done. What else? I pointed to the foreclosure notice on the desk. Who holds the note on Rachel's house? First National, Steinberg said. I want you to buy it, I said. Use the holding company, the one with the obscure name. Omega Holdings. Buy their debt. Buy Jason's car loans. Buy every cent of debt they have. I don't want them owing the bank. I want them owing me. Mike let out a low whistle. That is cold, Mr. Kowalski. It is business, I said. They want to play games with property rights. Let's teach them a lesson in ownership. And Steinberg, regarding the construction company, draft a new directive for the board. Effective immediately, any contracts with vendors associated with Jason's failed crypto partners are terminated. Scorched earth. Steinberg looked up, a small shark-like smile touching his lips. You are going to squeeze them. I am going to crush them, I corrected. But they need to believe they are winning. They need to walk into that trap thinking they have the cheese. Tomorrow, Rachel is going to take me to see this Dr. Vance. She wants a diagnosis. I will give her a performance that will win an Academy Award. I will be the most confused, helpless old man she has ever seen. I want that doctor to sign that paper. I want them to commit the crime. I want it on record. Mike tapped the flash drive. I can wire you up, Bernie. Audio and video. We can catch Vance soliciting a bribe or falsifying the exam. Do it, I said. I want high definition. I want to see the sweat on his forehead when I take him down. I walked back to the desk and picked up the tablet again. I looked at the message one last time. Old bag of bones. I set the tablet down gently. They think I am dying. They think I am weak. They are about to find out that I am the one who holds the sledgehammer. Steinberg stood up. It will take me all night to structure the debt acquisition. Bill me, I said. Bill me for every second. I walked toward the door. My step was light. The exhaustion was gone. I had a project now. It wasn't a skyscraper or a stadium. It was a lesson in respect. I paused at the door. One more thing, Arthur. Yes, Bernie. Find out where Brittany wants to go to college. Steinberg checked his notes. She has been talking about fashion school in Paris. Very expensive. Buy the building, I said. Steinberg paused, his pen hovering. Excuse me. Buy the building that houses the school, I said calmly. If I am going to pay for her education, I might as well be her landlord too. I want to control the roof over her head. When she realizes her tuition checks are bouncing because her parents are bankrupt, I want to be the one she has to call. I walked out into the hallway. The elevator dinged. I stepped in and watched the doors close. I was going home to my empty farm. I would sleep in the bed my wife and I had shared. I would look at her picture and apologize for what I was about to do to our daughter. But Catherine would have understood. She hated thieves, and she hated liars. Our daughter had become both. As the elevator descended, I checked my watch. It was 2 a.m. In 7 hours, Rachel would come to pick me up for the doctor's appointment. She would bring coffee. She would smile that fake smile. She would treat me like a child. Let them come. The trap was set, the bait was laid, and the wolf was waiting in the living room dressed in sheep's clothing. The morning sun glared off the hood of Rachel's luxury SUV as we pulled into the parking lot of a nondescript medical building on the edge of the city. It was not the hospital where my late wife had been treated, nor was it the office of my regular physician, who had known me for 20 years. This place was tucked between a dry cleaner and a payday loan center, a brick box with tinted windows that seemed designed to keep secrets rather than heal the sick. Rachel put the car in park and turned to me, her face arranged in that mask of exaggerated concern she had perfected over the last week. "Dad, we are just going to have a little chat with Dr. Vance," she said. Her voice pitched high and slow, the way one speaks to a disobedient child or a golden retriever. "He is a specialist. He is going to help us figure out why you have been so confused lately." I stared out the window, letting my mouth hang open slightly, keeping my eyes unfocused. I didn't tell her that I knew exactly who Dr. Vance was. I didn't tell her that Mike, my private investigator, had sent me a dossier on this man that was thick enough to choke a horse. Vance was a doctor who had lost his privileges at 2 major hospitals for ethical violations. He was a man drowning in gambling debts, a man who sold prescriptions and diagnoses to the highest bidder. He was the perfect tool for a daughter who wanted to erase her father's legal existence. I patted my chest pocket, feeling the hard rectangular outline of the high-definition recording device Mike had taped to the inside of my jacket. It was running. Every word, every lie, every breath in that room would be captured. "I don't need a doctor, Rachel," I mumbled, letting a tremor shake my hand as I reached for the door handle. "I just need to go to the farm. I need to feed the chickens. I haven't had chickens in 15 years, but Rachel didn't care about the details. She just needed the narrative. See, Dad?" "This is what I mean," she sighed, getting out and coming around to open my door. "You don't have chickens anymore. You are living in the past. Come on, let's get this over with." She gripped my arm hard, her nails digging into my bicep through the fabric of my coat. It wasn't a guiding hand. It was a shackle. We walked into the waiting room. It smelled of stale coffee and industrial cleaner. The carpet was worn, and the magazines on the table were 3 years old. There was no receptionist, just a sliding glass window that was firmly shut. Rachel knocked on it sharply. A moment later, a heavy door buzzed open, and a man in a white coat stepped out. He was younger than I expected, maybe 50, with slicked back hair and eyes that darted around the room like a trapped animal. He wore a gold Rolex that looked too big for his wrist and too expensive for this zip code. This was Dr. Vance. "Mrs. Miller," he said, extending a hand to Rachel. He didn't even look at me. "I see you brought the patient." "Yes," Dr. Rachel said, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "He has been worse this morning. He thinks he has livestock to feed. He forgot where he was 3 times on the drive over. We need that assessment today. The insurance needs it immediately." She had almost slipped. She almost said the bank. They needed the competency ruling to finalize the foreclosure bailout and sell my land. Vance nodded, his eyes finally sliding over Tim. He looked at me not as a person, but as a transaction. A quick signature, a fat envelope of cash, and his bookie would be off his back for another month. "Come on back, Bernie," Vance said, his tone oily and dismissive. "Let's take a look at you." I shuffled after him, dragging my feet, letting my shoulders slump. We entered an examination room that was barely larger than a closet. The examination table paper was wrinkled as if it hadn't been changed since the last patient. Vance sat on a rolling stool and gestured for me to sit on the exam table. Rachel stood by the door, arms crossed, guarding the exit like a prison warden. So Bernie Vance began clicking a pen. He didn't pick up a stethoscope. He didn't check my blood pressure. He went straight for the kill. "Do you know what year it is?" I looked at the ceiling, squinting as if trying to recall a distant memory. "It is 1998, I asked, my voice quavering. No, wait. Is Clinton still the president? I saw Rachel smirk in my peripheral vision. She was enjoying this. She was watching the mighty Bernie Kowalski, the man who demanded perfection on every job site, reduced to a babbling fool. Vance scribbled on his clipboard. Disoriented to time and place, he muttered loud enough for the recording to pick up. Okay, Bernie. Can you count backward from 100 by sevens? I stared at him blankly. 100? 7? I like the number 7. My wife, she liked 7. Where is Catherine? Is she coming to pick me up? Vance didn't even wait for me to finish. He checked another box. Severe cognitive impairment. Unable to perform simple calculations. He looked up at Rachel. It is textbook Mrs. Miller. Advanced dementia. Rapid onset. He is not capable of making financial or legal decisions. He is a danger to his own estate. Rachel let out a breath she must have been holding since she woke up. Thank you, doctor. You have no idea how hard this has been, watching him fade away like this. Can you sign the certificate now? We have an appointment with the caregivers this afternoon. Hold on, Vance said. I need to ask him a few more questions to make it official. Just for the file. He turned back to me, leaning in close. His breath smelled of peppermint and rot. Bernie, do you know who this woman is? He pointed to Rachel. I looked at my daughter. I looked at the greed in her eyes, the impatience, the total lack of empathy. I saw the little girl who used to cry when her ice cream fell, now grown into a woman who would push her father off a cliff for a purse. That is the lady from the bank, isn't it? I said softly. She wants my signature. Everyone wants my signature. Rachel rolled her eyes. See? He doesn't even know me. Vance nodded, flipping the page. Okay, Bernie. I am going to prescribe you something to help you calm down. It is called haloperidol. It will help with the agitation. This was it. The trap. I knew haloperidol. I knew it because when I built the psych ward at St. Jude's 10 years ago, I had read the spec sheets on the pharmaceutical storage protocols. It was a heavy antipsychotic. Used on elderly patients, it was often called a chemical restraint. It turned people into zombies. If he prescribed that without a proper physical workup, without checking my heart history, it was malpractice. It was assault. I widened my eyes, leaning forward, dropping the senile act just enough to deliver the payload. Haloperidol. I asked, my voice suddenly clear, though I kept the volume low. Is that like the Thorazine they used to give the boys in the Union I read in the Federal Register? Title 42, Section 483? That chemical restraints are illegal in nursing facilities without a specific diagnosis of psychosis. Are you saying I am psychotic? Dr. Vance froze. His pen stopped moving. He looked at me, really looked at me for the first time. I had just quoted the code of federal regulations regarding the rights of nursing home residents. It was a specific, dense piece of legal knowledge that no dementia patient would recall, let alone cite in context. For a second, panic flared in his eyes. He realized I had just referenced a federal statute. He looked at Rachel, then back at me. He was trying to figure out if I was lucid or if I was just parroting something I had heard on a news program. I leaned back, letting my mouth go slack again, returning to the character. I saw it on the TV. I mumbled, drooling a little. The man on the TV said, Section 483. He said the bad doctors go to jail. Do you like jail? Doctor, my friend, he went to jail in Ohio. For pills. Opioids. He lost his license. Just like the man on the TV. Vance turned pale. I had just referenced his past. I had just told him in the coded language of a madman that I knew about Ohio. I knew about the license he lost. I knew who he was. Rachel, oblivious to the duel happening between us, stepped forward impatiently. What is he talking about? He is rambling again. Just sign the paper, Doctor. Vance swallowed hard. He was sweating now. He looked at me and he saw the glint in my eye. He knew something was wrong. But he was trapped. He needed Rachel's money. He was in too deep to back out now. If he refused to sign, Rachel would demand a refund of the bribe she had likely already paid him. If he signed and I was faking it, he was finished. But greed is a powerful blinder. He convinced himself I was just repeating nonsense. He convinced himself a 71-year-old construction worker couldn't possibly know about his sealed record in another state. He is confabulating, Vance stammered, his voice cracking. Mixing reality with television. It is a classic symptom, very advanced. He turned to the clipboard and signed his name at the bottom of the certificate of incompetency. The scratching of the pen on the paper sounded like a gunshot in the small room. Here, he said, ripping the sheet off and handing it to Rachel. This declares him mentally incapacitated. It gives you immediate medical and legal guardianship pending a court hearing. Take him home. Give him the pills I am calling in. Keep him quiet. Keep him. Rachel took the paper as if it were the Holy Grail. She stared at it, a smile spreading across her face that was pure, unfiltered avarice. Thank you, Doctor. You have saved our family. She didn't know she was holding her own indictment. She didn't know that the piece of paper she was clutching was the final nail in her coffin. We have to go, Vance said, standing up abruptly. I have other patients. He wanted us out. He wanted me away from him. He was terrified. I stood up slowly. I looked at Vance. I tapped my chest pocket just once, a subtle gesture that meant nothing to Rachel, but everything to a man who lived in the shadows. The recorder. Have a nice day, Doctor. I said, my voice steady, the slur completely gone for just 1 second. Good luck with the audit. Vance's eyes widened, his jaw dropping, but Rachel was already pulling me out the door. Come on, Dad, we are getting ice cream. We are going to celebrate. We walked out into the parking lot. The sun was still shining, but the world had changed. They had done it. They had crossed the line. They had committed fraud, conspiracy, and malpractice, and I had it all on tape. Rachel buckled me into the car, treating me like a piece of precious, fragile cargo. Not because she loved me, but because I was now a liquid asset. She got into the driver's seat and pulled out her phone. I watched her type a message. I knew who it was for. It was for Jason. Got the paper, she typed. He is officially crazy. Call the realtor. Sell the farm. I closed my eyes and leaned my head against the cool glass of the window. Let them make the call. Let them set the date. Tomorrow was going to be the longest day of their lives. They thought they were driving a senile old man back to his deathbed. They didn't know they were driving the CEO of their destruction. Rachel started the engine and turned up the radio, humming along to a pop song. She was happy. She thought she had won the lottery. I sat in the silence of my own mind, reviewing the plan. Steinberg would have the assets moved by now. Mike would be securing the video feed from the doctor's waiting room to corroborate the timeline. The trap was sprung. As we drove away from the clinic, I looked back one last time. I saw Dr. Vance standing in the window, watching us leave, a look of pure dread on his face. He knew. He knew he had just made a fatal mistake. But Rachel. She didn't have a clue, and that was going to make the fall so much harder. I reached into my pocket and turned off the recorder. Phase 2 was complete. Now it was time for the escalation. It was time to let them think they were kings right before I toppled the throne. I closed my eyes and pretended to sleep, dreaming of justice. It tasted sweeter than the ice cream she was about to buy me. The rumble of a diesel engine shattered the morning peace of my farm. I looked out the kitchen window, my hands gripping the edge of the sink until my knuckles turned white. A massive moving truck was backing up my driveway, crushing the azaleas Catherine had planted 20 years ago. Behind it, Rachel's SUV and Jason's sports car followed like vultures circling a carcass. They weren't just visiting. They were invading. I walked out onto the porch, letting my shoulders slump, putting on the mask of the confused old man. Rachel jumped out of her car, barking orders at the movers. She wasn't wearing her usual high heels. She was in combat mode, leggings and sneakers, ready to clear out a life she deemed expired. "Dad," she shouted, waving a hand dismissively at the truck. "Don't panic. We are moving in. Dr. Vance said you need 24-hour supervision. We can't trust you alone out here anymore." I watched two burly men carry a leather sofa, my leather sofa, out of the living room and dump it on the grass. What are you doing?" I asked, my voice trembling just enough to sell it. "That is my chair. I sit there to read the paper." "Not anymore," Jason said, striding up the steps with a box of his own things. "That thing smells like old man and dust. We are bringing in our furniture. If we are going to take care of you, we need to be comfortable. This isn't a museum, Bernie. It is a living space." They didn't ask. They didn't knock. They just took over. For the next 3 hours, I sat on a wooden stool in the corner of the kitchen, watching them dismantle my life. It wasn't just furniture. It was history. Rachel went through the cabinets with a black trash bag, sweeping things off the shelves. My collection of spices from my travels. The mugs Catherine and I bought in Napa. The little clay statues Rachel herself had made in kindergarten. Trash, junk, clutter. She muttered the words like incantations, tossing items into the bag with a sickening crunch. Then she went for the hutch in the dining room. Inside was Catherine's collection of porcelain angels. She had collected them for 30 years. Each one had a name. Each one had a story. Rachel opened the glass door and started grabbing them by the handful. "Rachel, please," I said, standing up, letting a real note of panic enter my voice. "Not those. Your mother loved those." Rachel stopped and looked at me, a porcelain angel dangling from her fingers by a wing. "Mom is dead, Dad. These are just dust collectors. You don't need them. You probably don't even remember where half of them came from." She dropped the angel into the trash bag. The sound of it shattering against the other debris was a physical blow to my gut. I sat back down, lowering my head. I wasn't hiding my face to cry. I was hiding my face so she wouldn't see the cold, hard rage in my eyes. I added the price of those angels to the mental ledger I was keeping. The bill was getting higher by the minute. By noon, the house was unrecognizable. My furniture was either on the lawn or in the dumpster they had ordered. Their modern, sterile furniture filled the rooms. The warm oak and leather were replaced by glass and chrome. It looked like a hotel lobby, cold and impersonal. Then came the final insult. Jason walked into the kitchen drinking a beer he had taken from my fridge. "All right, Bernie, let's get you settled." We took the master bedroom, obviously. We need the space for our office setup to manage your estate. The master bedroom, the room where I woke up next to Catherine for 40 years. The room where we whispered our secrets in the dark. Where am I going to sleep?" I asked. Jason pointed a thumb downward. "The basement. There is that finished room down there next to the furnace. It is quiet. You won't be disturbed by us moving around upstairs. Plus, it is cooler down there. Good for your circulation." The basement room was a storage closet. It had a small window that looked out at the dirt. It smelled of damp concrete and oil. They were putting the owner of the estate, the man who built this house with his own 2 hands, into the cellar like an unwanted dog. I didn't fight. I couldn't. If I fought, they would call the police. They would show them Dr. Vance's paper. They would say I was violent. I shuffled to the stairs carrying the one small suitcase they had allowed me to keep. "It's okay," I mumbled. "I like the quiet." I spent the afternoon in the semi-darkness of the basement sitting on a cot they had set up. I could hear their footsteps above my head. Thump, thump, thump. The sound of invaders walking on my ceiling. I turned on the recorder again. I needed every second of this. Around 6 in the evening, the noise level changed. It wasn't just footsteps anymore. It was bass. Heavy rhythmic music vibrating through the floorboards. Laughter. Shouting. Brittany had arrived. I walked up the stairs, slowly opening the door to the kitchen. The scene was chaotic. Brittany had brought 4 friends, college kids with expensive clothes and loud voices. They were in my kitchen, eating my food, drinking my liquor. The patio doors were open, and some of them were out by the pool, a pool I had built for Rachel when she was 10. Brittany was sitting on the counter holding a martini glass. She saw me standing in the doorway, looking worn and gray in my old cardigan. She didn't jump down. She didn't introduce me. She rolled her eyes. "Ugh, ignore him," she said to a boy with bleached hair standing next to her. "That is just Grandpa. He is basically the help at this point. He comes with the house like the furniture." The boy laughed, a cruel braying sound. "Does he talk, or is he just for decoration?" Brittany smirked. "He thinks he talks. Mostly he just mumbles about the good old days. He is totally senile. My parents are taking over everything tomorrow. We are going to turn this place into a party house for the summer before we sell it." I stood there gripping the doorframe. The help. Decoration. I had set up a trust fund for this girl that would have paid for her entire life. I had planned to buy her an apartment in Paris, and she was treating me like a ghost in my own home. I walked over to the sink to get a glass of water. The bleached hair boy didn't move out of my way. I had to reach around him. He bumped my shoulder, spilling some of his drink on my sleeve. "Watch it, old man," he snapped. I looked at him. I memorized his face. I would find out who his parents were. I would find out where they worked. The Kowalski reach was long. I shuffled back toward the basement door, but I stopped near the hallway. Jason was there, talking on his phone, his back to me. He thought I was deaf or too confused to understand. "Yeah, the move is done," Jason said into the phone, laughing. "We put him in the dungeon, literally. He is happy as a clam down there. Look, tell the buyer we can sign the preliminary papers on Friday. No, don't worry about him. He won't be a problem. The doctor said his heart is a ticking time bomb. The stress of the move might just finish him off. We are counting on nature to take its course. If not, well, accidents happen on farms, right?" He hung up and turned around, startled to see me standing there. He didn't look ashamed. He looked annoyed. "What are you doing lurking there, Bernie? Go downstairs. We have guests." "I am going, Jason," I said softly. "I just wanted to make sure you were comfortable." I went back down to the basement and sat on the cot. My hands were shaking, but not from age. They were shaking from the effort of not strangling him. They were betting on my death. They were hoping for it. They were planning to facilitate it if nature was too slow. I looked at the water-stained ceiling. I thought about the call I had made to Steinberg earlier. The trap was ready. The pieces were in place. But I needed one more thing. I needed the final straw. The absolute, undeniable proof that there was no humanity left in them. The next morning I went upstairs early. The house smelled of stale beer and pizza. Rachel was in the kitchen nursing a hangover, wearing a silk robe. She was looking at her reflection in the microwave door, adjusting something around her neck. I froze. Around her neck was a string of pearls. Not just any pearls. They were South Sea pearls, slightly pink with a diamond clasp in the shape of a rose. I had bought those for Catherine on our 30th anniversary. I had flown to Japan to pick them out myself. Catherine had worn them every day until she died. She was buried in her wedding ring, but she had asked me to keep the pearls for Rachel, for when she was ready to appreciate the legacy. I had kept them in a velvet box in the back of my safe. The safe Rachel must have cracked while I was sleeping in the basement. "Rachel," I said, my voice cracking. "That necklace, that is your mother's." Rachel turned, touching the pearls absently. "Oh, this I found it in that old safe in the study. The combination was my birthday." "You really should be more creative, Dad." "Please," I said, stepping forward, reaching out a hand. "Take it off. Catherine wanted you to have it, but not like this. Not yet. It is special. It is sacred." Rachel laughed. It was a harsh, ugly sound. "Sacred. It is jewelry, Dad. It is worth 10 grand easy. I got it appraised this morning online. Mom is dead. She doesn't care who wears it. Besides, it looks better on me. It was wasted in that dark box, just like this house is wasted on you." She patted the clasp. "I am actually thinking of selling it. I saw a purse online that would match my new shoes perfectly. Pearls are a little old-fashioned, don't you think? Selling her dead mother's pearls to buy a purse." That was it. That was the moment. The last ember of fatherly love I had been holding on to, the tiny spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, she was being influenced by Jason, was extinguished. She was rotten. Rotten to the core. I looked at her. I really looked at her. I didn't see my daughter. I saw a thief. I saw a stranger. "You are right, Rachel," I said, my voice suddenly steady, the tremor gone. I dropped the act for just a second, letting her see the steel beneath the skin. "Mom is dead, and she is lucky she isn't here to see this." Rachel frowned, sensing the shift in tone. "What did you say?" I slumped my shoulders again, returning to the role. I said I need my pills. My head hurts." Rachel rolled her eyes, the moment of suspicion passing. "Go downstairs, Dad. Take your pills, and stay there. We have a party planner coming in an hour. We are throwing a big bash tonight. A birthday party for you. All the important people in town are coming. I need you out of the way until we bring you out for the cake. A birthday party. My birthday was 3 months ago. This wasn't a party for me. It was a victory lap. They were going to parade me in front of their friends, the senile old man they were so graciously caring for, while they spent my money and sold my home." I turned and walked toward the basement stairs. "Okay, Rachel. I will be ready." I went down into the dark. I sat on the cot and pulled out my phone. I texted Steinberg. "It is time. Bring the cavalry. Tonight." I looked at the recording device. It was full. I had the theft. I had the abuse. I had the conspiracy to commit murder. I had the desecration of my wife's memory. Tonight, they were going to throw a party. They were going to invite the elite of the city. They didn't know that the guest of honor was going to be the executioner. I laid back on the cot and closed my eyes. I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't sad. I was ready. The Kolaski demolition crew was on site, and the wrecking ball was swinging. The sun had barely set when the invasion entered its final phase. My farm, usually a sanctuary of cricket songs and rustling leaves, was now vibrating with the thumping bass of a sound system that cost more than my first truck. Floodlights bathed the backyard in an artificial blinding white glow, washing out the stars I used to watch with Catherine. They had set up a white tent on the south lawn, crushing the winter wheat I had planted as a cover crop. It wasn't just a party. It was a coronation. They were crowning themselves the new kings and queens of my empire, and I was the court jester they were dragging out for one last laugh. Rachel came down to the basement to get me at 7. She had changed again. Now she was wearing a shimmering gold dress that clung to her like a second skin, her hair piled high on her head in an intricate style that screamed money. She looked at me sitting on my cot in my stained cardigan and frowned. She didn't see her father. She saw a smudge on her perfect picture. "Get up, Dad," she snapped, throwing a garment bag onto the cot. "Put this on. We have guests arriving in 10 minutes. I won't have you looking like a hobo." I opened the bag. It was a cheap, ill-fitting suit. Polyester. It felt like sandpaper against my fingers. It was a size too big, likely bought off the rack at a discount store while she was shopping for her gold dress. I stood up slowly, letting my knees crack, playing the part of the creaky old man. I struggled with the buttons, making my hands shake violently. Rachel sighed, a sound of pure, unadulterated annoyance. "God, you are helpless. Here, let me do it." She slapped my hands away and began buttoning the shirt, her movements rough and impatient. She tightened the tie until I could barely breathe. "There. Now try not to drool on yourself. And for God's sake, don't try to tell any stories. Nobody wants to hear about concrete or foundations. Just smile, nod, and eat your cake." She sprayed me with a cloud of cologne that smelled like desperation and pine cleaner. Then she grabbed my arm and marched me up the stairs. The transformation of the main floor was complete. It was terrifying. My home was gone. In its place was a cocktail lounge. Waiters in black vests were circulating with trays of hors d'oeuvres that I couldn't identify. A bartender was mixing drinks in the corner where my favorite reading chair used to be. And the people. There were at least 50 of them. I recognized some of them. There was the mayor, a man I had donated to anonymously for years. There was the head of the local country club, a man who had once denied me membership because I worked with my hands. There were Rachel's friends, a gaggle of women who looked like clones of her holding wine glasses and judging the upholstery. They didn't see Bernie Kowalski, the titan of industry. They saw Bernie, the senile relic. "Here he is," Rachel announced, her voice pitching up into that fake, sugary register she used for the public. "The birthday boy." Applause rippled through the room. Polite, condescending applause. I looked at the banner hanging over the fireplace. "Happy 75th birthday, Dad." I was 71. She didn't even know my age. Or maybe she just didn't care. 75 sounded more fragile. 75 sounded like a man who was ready to check out. It was a small detail, but it cut deeper than the cheap suit. Jason came over, a scotch in his hand, his face already flushed with drink. He slapped me on the back, hard enough to make me stumble. "Look at him looking sharp, Bernie." He turned to a man standing next to him, a guy in a pinstripe suit who looked like a banker. "This is what I was telling you about Bob. Great genes. But the mind, you know how it is. The lights are on, but nobody is home." The banker nodded sympathetically, looking at me with pity. "It is a tragedy, Jason, truly. But you are doing a saint's work taking him in. Most people would just put him in a home and throw away the key." Jason sighed, swirling his scotch. "We try, Bob. We try. It is a burden, I won't lie. The medical bills, the constant supervision. But Rachel, she has a heart of gold. She couldn't bear to see him suffer alone." I stood there silent, my hands clasped in front of me to hide the fact that they had stopped shaking. I was recording. I was listening. Saints' work. A burden. I memorized their faces. I memorized the way Jason's hand rested possessively on the mantel of my fireplace. He thought he owned it. He thought he had already won. Rachel guided me to a chair in the corner away from the main action. "Sit here, Dad. Don't wander off." I sat. I became a piece of furniture. People walked by me talking about their vacations in Aspen, their new Teslas, their kitchen renovations. They talked about me in the third person, as if I were deaf or dead. "He looks peaceful," one woman said to Rachel. "He is medicated," Rachel whispered back, loud enough for me to hear. "We had to. He gets violent otherwise. He thinks he is still running a construction site. He starts yelling at people to wear hard hats. It is heartbreaking. Violent. Another lie to paint the picture of a dangerous lunatic. I watched Brittany across the room. She was with her friends taking selfies by the buffet. She had my mother's pearl necklace on. She had fished it out of the trash, or maybe she had stolen it back from her mother. She was wearing it with a ripped denim jacket, mocking the elegance it represented. "Check it out," I heard her say to a girl with pink hair. "Vintage. Authentic. My grandma left it to me." "She is alive?" the friend asked. Brittany shrugged. "Who cares? She is dead to me. I just wanted the pearls." I gripped the armrests of the chair. The fabric was rough polyester, not my soft leather. I focused on my breathing. In, out, tomorrow. Just wait until tomorrow. The party moved outside to the tent. Rachel came and hauled me up again. "Time for the speeches, Dad. Come on, try to walk straight." She led me out into the night. The tent was heated, filled with round tables and elaborate floral centerpieces. They sat me at the head table next to an empty chair. That chair was for appearances, a space for the ghost of the father they wished I was. Dinner was served. It was filet mignon. I looked at the steak. I looked for a knife. There wasn't one. Just a spoon. Rachel leaned over. "We didn't give you a knife, Dad. We don't want you to hurt yourself. I will cut it for you." She picked up her knife and fork and began to cut my meat into tiny bite-sized pieces like I was 3 years old. The humiliation burned in my cheeks. 50 people watched as my daughter cut my food. I could feel their eyes. Poor old man. Can't even feed himself. I ate the meat. It was cold. I chewed slowly, swallowing my pride with every bite. I needed the energy. I needed the strength for what was coming. After dessert, a cake that wasn't my favorite flavor but chocolate, which Rachel loved, the music died down. A spotlight hit the small stage at the front of the tent. Rachel walked up to the microphone holding a glass of champagne. She looked radiant. She looked like a predator who had just taken down a gazelle. "Thank you all for coming," she said, her voice trembling with practiced emotion. "It means the world to Jason and me to have our friends and family here. Tonight is about celebrating my father, Bernie." She gestured to me. A polite round of applause followed. I didn't wave. I stared at her. Rachel wiped a fake tear from her eye. You all know the struggles we have faced lately. Watching a parent decline is the hardest thing a child can do. We have tried so hard to keep him here on the farm he loves. We moved in. We disrupted our lives. We did everything we could to keep him home. She paused for effect. The room was silent. But we have to be realistic. We have to put his safety first. Yesterday, Dr. Vance gave us the news we have been dreading. Dad needs more care than we can give him. He needs 24-hour professional supervision. She took a deep breath, looking out at the crowd playing the martyr. So it is with a heavy heart that I announce that next week Dad will be moving to the Golden Sunset community. It is a beautiful place. It is the best place for him. Golden Sunset. I knew it. It was a state-run facility 3 counties over. It was underfunded, understaffed, and smelled of urine and bleach. It wasn't a community. It was a warehouse for the forgotten. Rachel looked at me, her eyes pleading for the audience, but hard as flint for me. We are doing this because we love you, Dad. We are doing this to protect you, and to ensure that your legacy, this farm, is preserved for the future. We will take care of everything. You can just rest now. The crowd erupted in applause. They were clapping for her bravery. They were clapping for her sacrifice. They were clapping for my imprisonment. Jason stood up and hugged her. Brittany clapped without looking up from her phone. I sat there. The spotlight caught the tears in Rachel's eyes, glistening like diamonds. They were fake. Everything about this night was fake. The cake, the smiles, the concern. It was a play, and I was the prop. But props don't talk back. Props don't fight. Rachel walked back to the table flushed with victory. She sat down next to me and placed her hand over mine. The crowd went back to their drinks, the show over. "You did good. Dad," she whispered, her nails digging into my skin. "You didn't make a scene. I am proud of you." I looked at her hand. I looked at the diamond ring she wore, a ring upgrade she had bought last month. I looked at her face, but I didn't see my daughter anymore. I saw a stranger. I saw an enemy. I slowly pulled my hand away from hers. I reached for my glass of water. I took a sip. Then I turned to her. I didn't scream. I didn't yell. I didn't throw the cake. I smiled. It wasn't the vacant smile of a dementia patient. It wasn't the polite smile of a guest. It was a smile that didn't reach my eyes. It was a smile that showed teeth. It was the smile I used when I walked into a boardroom, knowing I held 51% of the voting stock. It was a smile that said, "I know." Rachel frowned, her brow furrowing. She pulled back slightly. "What?" "Why are you looking at me like that?" I leaned in close. Close enough to smell the expensive champagne on her breath. Close enough to see the pores under her foundation. "The cake is dry, Rachel," I said. My voice was steady. It was deep. It was the voice of the man who commanded steelworkers and electricians. Rachel blinked. "What I said, the cake is dry," I repeated. "You should have ordered vanilla. Mom always made vanilla." Rachel stared at me. The fog of her triumph momentarily cleared. She heard the clarity. She heard the lack of a stutter. She heard the memory. You remember what kind of cake Mom made?" she stammered. "I remember everything, Rachel," I said softly. "I remember the cake. I remember the pearls. I remember the doctor. I remember the papers." Her face went pale. The noise of the party faded into the background. It was just us. The predator and the prey, but the roles were shifting in the dark. "Dad," she whispered. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms over my chest. I kept smiling, that terrible, knowing smile. "Enjoy the party, honey. It is a very expensive party. I hope it was worth it." Rachel opened her mouth to speak, but Jason came over, draping an arm around her shoulders. "Great speech, babe. They ate it up. Look at him. He is happy as a clam. He doesn't even know what is happening." Rachel looked at Jason, then back at me. She looked terrified. She saw the intelligence in my eyes, the sharp, cutting focus that Dr. Vance swore was gone. She saw her father. Jason, he just, what?" Jason laughed, slapping me on the back again. "He is fine. Come on, let's dance. They are playing our song." Jason pulled her away onto the dance floor. Rachel kept looking back at me over her shoulder, her eyes wide with a dawning, creeping horror. She knew. Somewhere deep in her gut, she knew something was wrong. I watched them dance. I watched them spin in circles under the tent I had paid for, drinking the wine I had paid for, celebrating the theft of the life I had paid for. Let them dance, let them spin. I reached into my pocket and touched the phone Steinberg had given me, a burner phone they didn't know about. I felt it buzz once. It was a text. "It is done. The sheriff is briefed. The bank has transferred the deeds. We are ready for 9 a.m. I took a bite of the dry chocolate cake. I swallowed it. It tasted like victory. Tomorrow the music would stop. Tomorrow the lights would go out. Tomorrow the landlord was coming to collect the rent, and they were all past due. I sat in the middle of the celebration, a silent island of vengeance, and I waited for the sun to rise on their judgment day. The next morning the sky was a flat slate gray, the kind of heavy sky that presses down on the world before a storm. I sat in my assigned chair in the corner of the living room, wearing the same ill-fitting suit Rachel had forced me into the night before. My hands rested on my knees, still and calm. The house smelled of strong coffee and nervous sweat. Rachel was pacing back and forth in front of the fireplace, her heels clicking sharply on the hardwood floor. She was wearing a power suit, navy blue, sharp angles. She looked like she was going to court, not selling her father's farm. Jason was in the kitchen, talking on the phone in hushed, frantic tones. I caught snippets. Yes, the buyer is on the way. Yes, the cash transfer is set for noon. No, he won't be a problem. He is sedated. I wasn't sedated. I had palmed the pills Rachel gave me with breakfast and flushed them down the toilet. My mind was razor sharp. I was counting the minutes. It was 8:45. Steinberg and the sheriff were parked a mile down the road waiting for my signal. At 9 o'clock, sharp, a black sedan pulled up the driveway. 2 men got out. One was slick, wearing a suit that cost more than my first house. The other was rougher looking, more like a bouncer than a real estate investor. This was the buyer Jason had found. A rapid close specialist. A shark who smelled blood in the water. They walked in without knocking. Rachel greeted them with a handshake that was too firm, too eager. "Mr. Sterling, thank you for coming on such short notice." Mr. Sterling looked around the room, his eyes landing on me for a split second, before dismissing me entirely. "Nice place," he grunted. "Good bones. Shame about the zoning, but we can fix that. Do you have the paperwork?" "We do," Jason said, rushing in from the kitchen with a manila envelope. "Everything is ready. The title deed, the inspection waiver, and the power of attorney." Sterling sat down at the dining table, spreading the documents out. He didn't even look at the fine print. He just pulled a gold pen from his pocket. "Let's get this done. I have a flight to catch." Rachel pulled out the power of attorney document, the one Dr. Vance had enabled with his signature. She placed it on the table next to the deed. She picked up a pen. Her hand hovered over the signature line. This was it. The moment of theft. The moment she signed away 40 years of my life for a quick payday. "Wait," Sterling said, holding up a hand. "Where is the doctor's note?" "My legal team requires the certificate of incompetency to be attached. Chain of custody, you know." "Right here," Rachel said, pulling the paper Vance had signed yesterday out of her purse. She smoothed it out on the table. "Dr. Vance signed it yesterday. Severe cognitive decline. He is incapacitated." She glanced at me as she said it. Her eyes were cold. There was no guilt there, only calculation. Sterling nodded. "Good. Sign it." Rachel lowered the pen. The tip touched the paper. The ink began to flow. I reached into my pocket and pressed the button on the burner phone. The front door didn't just open. It exploded inward. Sheriff Miller, a man I had known since he was a deputy, strode into the room, his hand resting on his service weapon. Behind him were 2 deputies and Steinberg carrying a briefcase that looked like it contained nuclear codes. "Nobody move!" Sheriff Miller shouted, his voice booming off the walls. "Step away from the table." Rachel dropped the pen. It rolled across the table, leaving a streak of black ink like a scar across the deed. Jason froze in the kitchen doorway, his face draining of color. Sterling looked annoyed, not scared. He was used to legal trouble. "What is the meaning of this?" Rachel shrieked, finding her voice. "We are concluding a private business transaction." "Who called you?" "I did," I said. My voice wasn't the mumbling whisper of the last week. It was the voice I used to direct crane operators from the ground floor. It cut through the chaos like a knife. Rachel spun around. Her eyes widened. "Dad." I stood up. I didn't struggle. I didn't shake. I stood up straight, buttoning my jacket with steady hands. I walked over to the table and picked up the power of attorney document. I looked at it, then looked at Rachel. You tried to sell my farm, Rachel. You tried to sell it for pennies on the dollar to a man who bulldozes history for strip malls. And you tried to do it by declaring me dead while I am still standing here. Bernie, Rachel stammered, stepping back. You are confused. The doctor said. The doctor is a liar, Steinberg interrupted, stepping forward. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick stack of papers. Dr. Vance is currently in custody. We picked him up 20 minutes ago at his office. He was very eager to cut a deal when we played him the recording. Recording, Jason squeaked. The recording of him signing a false diagnosis in exchange for a cash bribe, Steinberg said. And the recording of you, Mrs. Miller, instructing him to maximize the severity of the diagnosis to expedite the sale. Rachel turned pale. That is illegal. You can't record a doctor's visit, actually. I said, stepping closer to her. In a one-party consent state, I can record any conversation I am a part of, especially when I am the victim of a conspiracy. Sheriff Miller stepped forward, handcuffs gleaming in his hand. Rachel Miller. Jason Miller. I have warrants for your arrest. Conspiracy to commit fraud. Elder abuse. Forgery. Forgery. Rachel gasped. I didn't forge anything. Steinberg pulled another paper from his briefcase. This is the original power of attorney, Mr. Kowalski signed 10 years ago. It clearly states that any activation of power requires the consensus of 2 independent board-certified neurologists, not a disgraced general practitioner with a gambling problem. By attempting to use Vance's note to override this, you committed fraud. And by signing this deed today as his proxy, well, that is forgery. Jason tried to run. It was pathetic. He bolted for the back door, knocking over a chair. One of the deputies tackled him before he even reached the kitchen. He went down hard, screaming about his rights, about how it was all a mistake. Rachel didn't run. She just stared at me. Her eyes were filled with shock, but not remorse. She was shocked she got caught. Dad, please, she whispered. Tell them to stop. I am your daughter. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had thrown my wife's angels in the trash. I looked at the woman who had put me in the basement. My daughter died a long time ago, I said softly. I don't know who you are. The sheriff grabbed her wrists and spun her around. The click of the handcuffs was the loudest sound in the room. Rachel started to cry loud, ugly sobs. It wasn't the cry of a heartbroken child. It was the cry of a narcissist who had lost her audience. Sterling stood up, gathering his things. Well, this seems like a family matter. I will be going. The deal is obviously off. Sit down, Mr. Sterling, Steinberg said. You aren't going anywhere. We have questions about your relationship with Jason Miller and the kickbacks you offered him for this quick sale. Sterling sat back down, his face gray. I walked over to the window. I watched as they led Jason out in cuffs, still shouting. I watched them lead Rachel out, her head hung low. I watched my granddaughter Brittany drive up the driveway in her convertible, music blaring only to slam on the brakes when she saw the police cars. I saw the confusion on her face turn to terror as she realized the party was over. I turned back to the room. It was quiet now. Just me, Steinberg, the sheriff, and the shark in the expensive suit. The farm was safe, but the house felt empty. It felt cold. I had won the war, but the battlefield was scorched. Steinberg walked over to me and put a hand on my shoulder. It is done, Bernie. The assets are secure. The power of attorney is void. I nodded. Thank you, Arthur. I looked at the table where the ink stains still marred the deed. I picked up the pen Rachel had dropped. It was heavy, expensive. I walked over to the fireplace and tossed the pen into the cold ashes. Get them out of here, Arthur, I said, my voice tired. Get everyone out. I have a lot of cleaning up to do. I had taken back my life. Now I had to figure out what was left of it. The silence of the house settled around me heavy and absolute. I was alone. But for the first time in weeks, I was free. The room was thick with the smell of fear and ruined ambition. The handcuffs were on, the deputies were standing guard, but Rachel wasn't done. She was never done. Even in chains, her entitlement was a living, breathing thing thrashing against reality. She twisted in the grip of the officer, her face contorted not with sorrow, but with a fury that was almost impressive in its delusion. "You can't do this," she screamed, her voice shredding the silence of the farmhouse. "It doesn't matter what papers you have, Dad. It is my inheritance, it is my right. I am your only child, everything you have is going to be mine eventually anyway. We just tried to access it a little early to save the family. Do you want your grandchildren on the street? Do you want us to starve? You owe us this, you owe me." I stood by the fireplace listening to her scream about what I owed her. I thought about the dance recitals I sat through, the tuition checks I wrote without blinking, the down payment on her first house, the car she crashed and I replaced. I thought about the nights I spent working overtime in the freezing cold to make sure she never knew what it meant to be hungry. I walked slowly toward her. The deputies tensed, but Sheriff Miller waved them off. He knew I wasn't going to hit her. I didn't need to hit her. I had something much heavier to drop. "You talk about what is yours, Rachel," I said. My voice low and calm, a stark contrast to her screeching. "You talk about inheritance as if it is a paycheck you earned. But you didn't earn a dime of it. And as for your family starving, that is an interesting point." I turned to Steinberg. "Arthur, give me the file. The blue one." Steinberg stepped forward, opening his briefcase again. He pulled out a blue folder thick with documents. He handed it to me with a solemn nod. I opened the folder and pulled out a sheet of paper. It wasn't a deed to my farm. It was a deed to a different house. "Do you recognize this?" I asked, holding it up for Rachel and Jason to see. Jason squinted, his face pale and sweaty. That is the title to our house. Our mansion in the Heights." "Correct," I said. "Or rather, it is the foreclosure notice on your mansion. First National Bank initiated proceedings 3 weeks ago because you haven't paid your mortgage in 6 months." Rachel stopped struggling. Her eyes darted from the paper to me. "So what, we were going to pay it off with the farm money?" "That was the plan, you can't stop the bank." I smiled. It was a cold winter smile. "Actually, I can. Because First National doesn't hold your note anymore. They sold the debt last week. Distressed assets. They were happy to get it off their books." Jason's knees seemed to give out. He slumped against the deputy holding him. Who bought it?" "I did," I said simply. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the air conditioning seemed to stop humming. "Omega Holdings." I continued reading from the document. "A quiet little investment firm. Very private. I am the sole shareholder. I bought your mortgage, Jason. I bought your car loans. I bought the credit card debt you ran up gambling on digital coins that don't exist." I took a step closer, invading their space, looming over them like the skyscraper I built downtown. "I am not just your father anymore, Rachel. I am not just the victim of your fraud. I am your creditor. I am the bank. And unlike First National, I don't offer grace periods." Rachel's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The reality of her position was crashing down on her. She wasn't just going to prison. She was going to prison bankrupt. Jason started to whimper. "Bernie, please, we can work this out. I can work. I can pay you back." "You can't pay me back," I said, cutting him off, "because you don't have a job. I made a call yesterday to the board of directors at your firm. I told them about the embezzlement investigation the district attorney is opening. You were fired effective this morning. You just didn't know it yet because you were too busy trying to rob me." I pulled another document from the blue folder. This one was a seizure order. This was signed by a judge an hour ago, I said, my voice devoid of any emotion. Since I hold the debt, and since you have proven to be a flight risk and a fraudster, I have been granted an emergency freeze on all your remaining assets. Your bank accounts are locked. Your cars are being towed as we speak. The mansion. The locks are being changed at noon. Rachel looked at me with pure horror. You are evicting us from our own home. Where will Brittany go? She is innocent. Brittany, I said, feeling a twinge of pain but burying it under the necessity of the lesson. Brittany is at the house right now finding out that her key doesn't work. But don't worry. I didn't leave her on the street. I rented her a room. A very small room in a boarding house near the community college. She has a job interview tomorrow at a diner. I set it up for her. If she wants to eat, she will work. If she wants to learn, she will study. But the party is over. The free ride is over. Rachel screamed. It was a primal sound of rage and loss. You monster. You are destroying your own family. You are taking everything I took. Everything I asked, my voice rising, for the first time thunder rolling in the room. I gave you everything. I gave you life. I gave you education. I gave you a safety net, so wide you could sleep on it. And you cut it. You took scissors to the net because you wanted the gold threads for yourself. I threw the blue folder onto the table. It landed with a heavy thud. You wanted my money, Rachel. You wanted the power that comes with the Kowalski name. Well, now you have the full weight of it. You wanted to treat this family like a business transaction. Fine. You made a bad deal, and I am calling in the loan. Sheriff Miller stepped forward, looking uncomfortable but resolute. All right, that is enough. We need to transport them. Wait, I said. I reached into my pocket and pulled out one last thing. It was a checkbook. My personal checkbook. The one they had tried to steal. I ripped out a check. I didn't write anything on it. I just crumpled it up into a tight ball. Jason looked at it with hungry, desperate eyes. This is what you thought I was, I said, holding the paper ball in front of his face. Just paper. Just a resource to be used up and thrown away. I dropped the ball of paper on the floor. Take them away, Sheriff. The deputies began to haul them toward the door. Jason was sobbing, his legs dragging on the floor. Rachel was still staring at me. Her eyes filled with a hate so pure it was almost blinding. I will never forgive you, she screamed as they dragged her out onto the porch. I hope you die alone in this big empty house. I hope you rot. I listened to her screams fade as they put her in the back of the cruiser. I stood in the middle of my living room, surrounded by the strange furniture they had brought in the remnants of their invasion. Steinberg closed his briefcase. The click was loud in the sudden silence. That was thorough, Bernie, he said quietly. It was necessary, I replied. I walked over to the window and watched the police cars drive away, lights flashing, carrying away the last of my biological family. They wanted the inheritance, Arthur. They wanted the end of the story. They just didn't realize I was the one writing it. I looked out at the fields of my farm. The winter wheat was crushed where they had put the tent, but the roots were still there. It would grow back. It would take time and a lot of work, but it would grow back. What about the mansion? Steinberg asked. What do you want me to do with it? Sell it, I said immediately. Liquidate it. Take the money and put it into the trust for the victims of elder abuse. Every cent. I don't want a penny of their debt money. I just wanted the control. I wanted them to know that the hand that fed them could also take away the plate. Steinberg nodded. And Brittany? I sighed. Keep an eye on her. If she keeps the job at the diner for 6 months, if she shows up, works hard, and doesn't ask for a handout, then we can talk about tuition. But not Paris, State College. She needs to learn that the world doesn't owe her a view of the Eiffel Tower. I turned away from the window. The house felt huge. It felt silent. But for the first time in weeks, it didn't feel like a prison. It felt like a fortress that had just repelled a siege. "I'm going to change the locks again," I said. "And Arthur?" "Yes, Bernie. Send a bonus to Mike. And get me the number for that gardening service. I want those azaleas replanted. I want this place to look like Catherine's home again. Not a hotel, not a bank, a home." I sat down in the single chair that was left in the room, the one Jason hadn't thrown out, because he used it to stack his magazines. I closed my eyes. I was 71 years old. I had just sent my daughter to prison and bankrupted my son-in-law. I was alone. But as I sat there listening to the old house settle, I felt a strange sense of calm. I hadn't lost my family today. I had lost a tumor. I had cut out the rot that was killing me. And now, finally, the healing could begin. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with air that finally belonged to me again. It was cold, and it was sharp, and it felt like life. Sheriff Miller stepped forward, the creak of his leather gun belt breaking the heavy silence of the room. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket, the warrant that would seal the fate of my family. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. The weight of the law was in every syllable. "Rachel Miller and Jason Miller, you are hereby under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, forgery of legal documents, and elder abuse in the first degree. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." The words hung in the air like smoke. Elder abuse. It was an ugly term. It conjured images of bruises and neglect of physical violence. But what they had done was more insidious. They had tried to erase my mind. They had tried to steal my autonomy. They had tried to bury me while I was still breathing. Jason was the first to break. He slumped against the wall, his expensive suit now looking like a costume on a child. "I didn't do it." He whimpered, tears streaming down his face, mixing with the sweat of his panic. "It was her idea. She told me you were sick. She told me it was the only way to save the house. I just signed the papers. I just did what she told me." Rachel spun on him, her hands cuffed behind her back, her eyes blazing with a feral intensity. "You coward," she hissed. "You spineless worm. You were happy enough to spend the money when you thought we were going to get away with it. You were the one who looked up the foreclosure laws. You were the one who found the doctor. Don't you dare pin this on me." I watched them turn on each other. The united front they had presented to the world, the perfect couple who just wanted to take care of their aging father, disintegrated in seconds. It was pathetic. It was inevitable. Rats always eat each other when the ship goes down. The deputies moved in, taking them by the arms. They led them toward the door, past the overturned chairs and the remnants of the failed sail. I didn't look away. I forced myself to watch. I needed to remember this. I needed to remember that the little girl with pigtails was gone, replaced by this woman who would sell her soul for a country club membership. Just as they reached the threshold, the front door flew open. Brittany stood there, breathless, her face flushed. She had seen the police lights from the road. She was wearing a designer jacket I had paid for and carrying a purse that cost more than my first car. She looked at her parents in handcuffs. She looked at the sheriff. She looked at me. And she didn't run to hug her mother. She didn't ask why her father was crying. She looked at me, her eyes wide with a selfish, piercing panic. "Grandpa," she shrieked, her voice cracking. "What is happening? What about Paris? My tuition is due on Monday. The deposit on the apartment is non-refundable." I felt a coldness settle in my stomach that had nothing to do with the temperature. Her parents were being hauled away on felony charges, and her first thought was her semester abroad. Her only thought was the interruption of her cash flow. The rot had gone deep. It had infected the roots and the branches. Rachel looked at her daughter, a flicker of shame finally crossing her face. "Brittany, honey, call the lawyer." "Call?" She didn't finish. The deputy guided her out the door and into the back of the cruiser. The door slammed shut with a finality that echoed in my bones. I turned my attention to my granddaughter. She was standing in the middle of the room, looking at me with an expression of pure entitlement. She wasn't sad. She was annoyed. She was inconvenienced. "You have to fix this, Grandpa," she said, stomping her foot like a toddler. "I can't miss this semester. All my friends are going. You have money. Mom said you have millions hidden away. You can just write a check, right? Just fix it so I can go." I walked over to the table where the voided deed still lay. I picked up a single sheet of paper I'd prepared the night before. It wasn't a check. It wasn't a bank transfer. It was a folded piece of cheap printer paper. I walked over to Brittany. I looked at her, really looked at her. I saw the emptiness in her eyes. I saw the product of a lifetime of getting everything she wanted without ever lifting a finger. I saw my own failure to intervene sooner. "I am not writing a check, Brittany," I said, my voice calm and steady. "There is no Paris. There is no apartment. The trust fund is frozen. Your parents are going to prison, and they are bankrupt. The free ride is over." Her jaw dropped. "You can't do that. That is my money." "It was never your money," I corrected her. "It was my money, and I am done paying for people who despise me." I held out the piece of paper. She looked at it confused. "What is this? Take it," I said. She snatched it from my hand and unfolded it. She stared at it, her brow furrowing as she tried to make sense of what she was seeing. This is a job application," she whispered, looking up at me with horror. "For a diner, the Rusty Spoon, that place is gross. Why are you giving me this?" "Because I know the owner," I said. "His name is Sal. He is a good man. He needs a dishwasher and a waitress for the morning shift. It pays minimum wage plus tips. If you show up tomorrow at 6 in the morning, he will give you an apron." Brittany looked at the paper as if it were covered in anthrax. "You expect me to wash dishes? I am an influencer. Grandpa, I have followers. I can't work at a diner." "You can and you will," I said, my voice hardening. "If you want to eat, if you want a roof over your head, because I am not paying your rent anymore. I paid the lease on your apartment through the end of the month. After that, you are on your own. If you want to go to college, you can apply for student loans like everyone else. If you want money, you can earn it." She crumpled the paper in her hand and threw it at my feet. "I hate you. You are ruining my life. You are a bitter old miser." I looked down at the ball of paper. Then I looked back at her. "No, Brittany. I am saving your life. You just don't know it yet. Your parents taught you that you are owed the world. I am teaching you that the world owes you nothing." I pointed to the door. "Now get out. Go home. Pack your things. You have a shift tomorrow morning. Don't be late. Sal hates it when people are late." She stared at me, tears of rage streaming down her face. She waited for me to crack. She waited for the grandpa who used to slip her $100 bills to reappear. But he was gone. He had been replaced by a man who knew that sometimes the kindest thing you can do is let someone fall. She spun around and ran out the door, sobbing. I heard her car start, the engine revving aggressively as she peeled out of the driveway. She left the crumpled application on the floor. I bent down and picked it up. I smoothed it out on the table. She would be back. When the hunger set in, when the reality that the credit cards were dead finally hit her, she would be back, and the job would be waiting. I walked to the window and watched the last of the police cars disappear down the long dirt road. The dust settled in the driveway. The silence returned to the farm. It wasn't the heavy, oppressive silence of the last week. It was a clean silence. The air felt lighter. The house felt like it was breathing again. Steinberg was packing up his briefcase. He looked tired. We both were. "Are you okay, Bernie?" he asked softly. I looked around the room. I saw the empty spaces where my furniture used to be. I saw the marks on the floor. I saw the wreckage of my family. "I am fine, Arthur," I said. "I lost a daughter today. But I think I might have saved a legacy." I turned away from the window. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the floor. It was over. The parasites were gone. The wound was cauterized. Now all that was left was to rebuild. And if there was one thing Bernie Kowalski knew how to do, it was build. The waves crash against the rocks below my balcony with a rhythm that I have finally learned to sleep to. It is a different sound than the wind howling through the cornfields of the farm, but it is a welcome change. I am sitting on the terrace of a glass-walled house on the coast of Maine. The air here is cold and smells of salt and pine. It smells clean. It smells like a place where ghosts cannot follow you. Steinberg sits across from me nursing an iced tea. He looks more relaxed than I have ever seen him. He isn't wearing a tie. For the first time in 30 years, we are just two old friends watching the sun go down over the Atlantic. He reached into his bag, but this time he didn't pull out a crisis. He pulled out a final report. "It is done, Bernie," he said, his voice mixing with the sound of the surf. "The judge handed down the sentences this morning. Rachel got 8 years. Jason got 10. The federal charges for wire fraud pushed it over the edge. They are being transferred to a federal facility in Pennsylvania next week." I nodded, looking out at the gray water. 8 years. My daughter would be nearly 50 when she tasted freedom again. It should have made me sad. A father should weep for his child in chains. But I didn't feel sadness. I felt the satisfaction of a structural engineer who has finally removed a load-bearing wall that was threatening to collapse the whole building. "Did they ask for me?" I asked, taking a sip of my coffee. Steinberg shook his head. "No. Jason was too busy crying. Rachel. She just stared at the wall. She still thinks this is a mistake. She still thinks the world broke its promise to her. She hasn't learned, Bernie. I don't think she ever will." I leaned back in my chair. That is the tragedy, Arthur. It isn't the prison time. It is the fact that she had everything and she traded it for a shortcut that led off a cliff. And the girl I asked. Brittany Steinberg smiled a genuine small smile. She is still at the Rusty Spoon. Sal tells me she was late twice last month and he docked her pay. She didn't quit. She didn't scream. She put on her apron and worked a double shift to make up the difference. She is tired, Bernie. She looks 10 years older than she did at that party. But she is paying her own rent. I felt a warmth in my chest that had nothing to do with the sun. "Good," I said. "Keep the scholarship fund open. If she makes it to Christmas, if she survives a year of serving eggs and scrubbing floors without asking for a handout, send her the application for the state university. Not Paris. But a chance, a real chance." Steinberg closed the folder. "You are a hard man, Bernie Kowalski." I looked at my hands. They were old hands, spotted and veined, but they were steady. "I am not hard, Arthur. I am just finished with soft lies. I sold the farm 3 months ago. I couldn't stay there. The memories of Catherine were there, yes, but they had been polluted by the invasion. Every time I looked at the dining room, I saw Rachel trying to force a pen into my hand. Every time I looked at the basement door, I remembered the cot. So I sold it to a young couple who wanted to raise horses. I left them the tractor. I hope they find the peace there that I lost. I moved here. I stopped hiding the money. I bought this house with the cash from the Zurich account. I bought a boat. I hired a chef not because I can't cook, but because I earned the right to have someone else chop the onions. But I didn't just retire. I used the liquidation of Jason's debt and the sale of the farm to seed a new project. The Catherine Kowalski Defense Fund. We pay for lawyers for elderly people who are being exploited by their families. We hire private investigators to find the hidden assets of greedy children. We are the cavalry that comes over the hill when everyone else has looked away. Every week I read the files. I see the same stories. The son who steals the pension. The daughter who sells the house. And every time we win a case, every time we put a stop to the theft, I feel a little bit of weight lift from my soul. I stood up and walked to the railing. The sun was dipping below the horizon, painting the sky in bruised purples and angry reds. People tell you that family is everything. They tell you that blood is thicker than water. They tell you that you have to forgive because you share a last name. They are wrong. Blood is just biology. Family is behavior. Family is the people who respect you when you are weak. Family is the people who protect you when you are vulnerable. Rachel and Jason weren't family. They were parasites who shared my DNA. I looked at Steinberg. He was my family. Mike, the detective who saved my life, was my family. The young couple raising horses on my old land were more family to me than the woman sitting in a cell in Pennsylvania. I took a deep breath of the salt air. I was 71 years old. I was alone in a big house by the sea. But I wasn't lonely. I was clean. I had cut out the rot. I had secured the foundation. I turned back to Steinberg. Stay for dinner, Arthur. The chef is making lobster. And tomorrow bring me the file on that case in Ohio. The widow with the 3 sons. I think it is time we paid them a visit. I am Bernie Kowalski. I built skyscrapers. I built a fortune. And when my own blood tried to tear it down, I built a fortress they couldn't breach. I am still standing. And the view from here is spectacular. This journey has taught me a hard lesson, one that no father ever wants to learn. We spend our lives building homes, building fortunes, building families. We assume that the foundation of blood is unbreakable, but I learned that blood is just biology. Loyalty, respect, and kindness are choices. My daughter chose greed. She looked at me and saw a bank account with a pulse. She mistook my silence for senility and my patience for weakness. To anyone listening who feels trapped by the obligation of family, who feels like a resource rather than a person, know this: you have the right to close the door. You have the right to protect your dignity, your legacy, and your peace. It is not cruel to demand respect. It is not selfish to cut off a limb that is poisoning the body. True family doesn't plot your demise. They celebrate your life. I may have lost a daughter, but I regained my self-respect. And in the end, standing alone in a house built on truth is far better than living in a crowded mansion built on lies. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more. Now I want to hear from you. If you were in my shoes, would you have sent them to prison, or would you have just cut them off financially? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. See you in the next story.